Welcome to ESVN, the Emma Sports Vigeland Network show. My name is Emma Vigeland, and you know what to do, folks. Subscribe, youtube.com/ESVN show. Put on push notifications. Rate us 5 stars wherever you're listening to or watching this. And if you're watching us live, like the stream. Comment below if you're watching us later on. And say hello to Bradley Elsa.
Hello, everyone.
Oh my gosh, could this football season, at least from my perspective, be any more depressing?
No, this was a good week for me. The Jets are on a bye.
That is true. I don't want to spread my lack of cheer about football into like the rest of the audience, because say you could be a Lions fan, or you could be a Chiefs fan, or you could be a Bills fan, and all is well in the world. Not so much with the New York Giants. I think we're just going to get right into it, shall we?
Let's do it.
We're not going to open with the Giants game, but we will open with a story related to the New York Giants because much like my prediction that Kamala Harris would have a swing state sweep, my prediction that Saquon Barkley would do poorly
Let's not bring up old shit.
on the Eagles is also falling apart. He may be even in MVP talks. The last time that a running back won MVP was Adrian Peterson 12 seasons ago after he went for over 2,000 yards coming off an ACL, which was unheard of at the time. But Saquon is on pace for 2,000 yards rushing if he is going to continue at this pace. During the game last night, in front of a national audience, Saquon Barkley went off. He had over 300 all-purpose yards. That included a 70-yard rushing touchdown. He rushed for 255 yards on the evening and also caught, I think, like 47 yards worth of passes. He has now passed 1,500 yards from scrimmage for the season. This game is the 9th best game in rushing history in the NFL. And he just looks like the superstar athlete that he is. And, you know, at the end of the day, I am happy for him as long as they don't win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, these were some Madden type numbers from Saquon yesterday, and not a good time to be facing him in fantasy football, may I say.
We are bitter.
But yeah, I mean, there was some talk going into this game. I mean, not that much. I just mean I thought there was a potential for it to be interesting despite the Rams, attrition and injuries, just because they're, the young guys on their defensive front have been kind of exciting and enjoyable to watch. But truly, both sides of the ball in the trenches, they just shredded these guys. Because I think basically once the rush could not get to Saquon, the spine of the Rams defense is not nearly as talented as any of the guys on their front. So as soon as Saquon sort of got to the second level, like got to where the linebackers were, it was essentially they were not going to be able to tackle him.
No.
And it helped a lot. It was a real boon for the Eagles to have Jordan Mailata back in that spot, back in the left tackle spot. So the guys in the front played amazing, and Saquon just utilized every inch of space that they got. They carved out for him. To full, with full availability and full yardage for that matter.
And the thing is that the Rams are well coached on defense, but in reality, they're probably like a bottom 10 defense in terms of overall talent.
Yeah. The secondary, the linebackers, not very talented.
So, I mean, they just decided like we are going to run all over you, and that's what they did. And this has been the year underrated. I mean, there's two themes this year that I think are important to point out. Is like, we have seen a separation in between the really great teams and the really bad teams more quickly than we have in previous years, which I'm sure the league is not happy about because they want every game to be competitive.
Right.
But like this has been an obvious, these teams are good teams and these teams are bad teams. And that was clear probably in week 6 or 7. That's way too early for what the NFL would like. But the other theme is that running backs that left their old teams, those old teams are missing them. Whether it be Saquon with the Giants, Joe Mixon with the Bengals, who, like, he is, his loss is being felt by the Bengals, who don't necessarily, I mean, I know Chase Brown is playing well, but Mixon, Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say also like Josh Jacobs in Green Bay,
Josh
Aaron
Jacobs,
Jones, which actually that was sort of an okay trade because they swapped. I mean, Jacobs went to Green Bay and Aaron Jones went to Minnesota, but still sort of like.
But all four of those guys are having really good years in their career, and
definitely.
It's almost like, okay, you could have paid me and I could have stayed here.
Right.
And I think like Saquon in particular is, I mean, he's a special athlete and we all know what his legs look like. So he's a whole different, not animal, but turn of phrase. But it puts, I think, to rest some of the more cynical arguments about just churning through running backs and drafting the next cheapest guy. Like, it's not always that simple. And Saquon is elevating this offense, which is not that complicated from a schematic perspective. I mean, like when Shane Steichen left, the Eagles' offense became a lot more simple. And they're still getting it done because he's added such a talent infusion to that playmaking part of the game.
And I also think it's sort of some of these teams that are like kind of bought into a little bit of the depression in the market, sort of.
Yeah.
So like while Saquon had to obviously get paid more, same goes for Jacobs, same goes for Mixon. And Aaron Jones to an extent, obviously just a little bit different, just because he's a little older, but because as a result, these teams, as you were saying, Emma, have been able to at least have the option of something that's either a little bit more explosive or diversifies their portfolio of plays. Because, for example, this is going to be unfortunate for Alexander Mattison because that what I'm about to say is that for both of his teams, because it intersects finally with the point I'm making, which is the Vikings run game I think is much more engaging and much more dynamic with Aaron Jones in the backfield as opposed to Alexander Mattison.
Yes.
And then Alexander Mattison was also the person who replaced Josh Jacobs in Vegas, and we're seeing how Josh Jacobs is performing for the Packers and what the run game looks like in Vegas.
Well, Alexander Mattison, he must be one of those guys that's just great to coach because I never saw anything that would indicate that he could be a starting running back in the league, but I guess some other teams saw it a bit differently. The other part about what's going on with the Eagles right now, and it looks like the Eagles and the Lions are on a collision course in the NFC, which would be really fun. But the Eagles' defense is really starting to take over. The Rams did not convert a third down last night. And Stafford was upright basically the whole time against the Patriots. They didn't get a sack. They were all over him last night. He was hit 11 times and sacked 5 times by the Eagles. And they are built around their defensive line for the most part, and their secondary has started to play phenomenal. We highlighted this last week, Quinyon Mitchell being just the stud that, he was a stud, and he probably shouldn't have dropped that far in the first round, you dumbasses, giving the Eagles and Howie Roseman another victory. And for them to double dip with Cooper DeJean on
my God. To just fully stock their, secondary with 2 really young, talented players.
Anyone who's nerdy about the draft, worships Howie Roseman because it's like any draft nerd view on a guy like that. Quinyon Mitchell was the guy that a trendy athletic freak, right? But he played at a smaller school, so some GMs get scared. It's like Howie Roseman does everything that draft Twitter nerds want you to. And he also sort of was one of those. Manager. He also sort of was one of those guys where the big board, so called, in the mock drafts were almost there was a bit of a disparity because by talent level he was actually, I would almost honestly say, closer to a top 7 talent in that draft, and then he obviously falls into the 20s. Same with Dallas Turner. I mean, I guess there was stuff that came out where he's younger than I even knew and a little more immature, but he's having a pretty good year for the Vikings too, and he fell. Yeah, and so I think it's I forgot what I was going to say to you about this. I'm sorry. I interrupted you. I was basically saying, Quinyon Mitchell being... Oh, yeah, sorry, about Quinyon. And I think basically, to your point, I do agree that, probably just a bit of, the competition, the strength of schedule, level of competition being in the Mid-Atlantic Conference probably dropped him a little bit. But it's clear, as you were saying, that the tape and also sort of, the...
disparity between how good Mitchell was relative to his competition was accurate enough to how it's being shown in the NFL, that it wasn't, he was never playing down to like Toledo level competition. He was actually playing up very, very far above the school that he was playing at.
Right.
And then to see, the kind of the front seven, as you were saying, Jalen Carter is just an incredible player. We're seeing a little bit more from guys like Nolan Smith and Nakobe Dean at linebacker. Milton Williams, one of my favorite guys to watch in the middle of that front. He's been having a really, really great season. It's all of the personnel and all of the talent on this team is seemingly starting to come together. And again, I will say it just because I do still think it's true. I really think they are succeeding because they are so talented in spite of Nick Sirianni.
Yes, it's incredible.
Like, this team is 9-2 just because they have literally, it is such a talent-rich environment. I don't even think a bad coach or kind of like a beguiling or like befuddling coach can like stop the momentum of this team.
Even if he just gets one ring, Howie Roseman is one of the best executives in sports that I've ever seen in my life. Like, he's just,
no question.
He is up there.
The combination of his talent and his scouting eye also combined with his willingness to take risks,
and even when he
huge.
fails, like, what was that guy, Jalen Rieger? I almost said Jalen Naylor, but you corrected, because that's the different wide receiver.
Different with the OR at the end of the name. Yeah,
yes.
Different Jalen with the OR last name.
I clown them because I'm a Giants fan. Oh, you should take Justin Jefferson, losers. They ripped off the Band-Aid, and what do you know? They figured it out, and they got A.J. Brown in that in that trade with the Titans. And so, he understands how to not double down on mistakes, which a lot of general managers, I experienced this with Dave Gettleman. They do that because they want to prove a narrative that they already have about a player. Howie Roseman is great about that. Speaking of the New York Giants got destroyed on the same day beforehand that Saquon Barkley had a historic performance on national television. What do you know? Tommy DeVito's just pretty bad at football and was a third-string quarterback for a reason. Good job, by the way, Dable, elevating him over Drew Lock. Why? Because we'd get a few more Italian Americans from Jersey to show up to the game.
That's an underrepresented group.
Yeah, I get you want to sell tickets and you're one of the worst teams in the league again. But perhaps, I don't know, giving the guy who has actual arm talent the reins of the offense might have been a good idea. Since we last spoke, Daniel Jones has been cut from the New York Giants.
Right. We didn't talk about this on Thursday?
We talked about him being benched.
But not cut.
He was.
Wow. Oh, gosh.
Well,
wow.
I think that we maybe, it wasn't clear that it was his decision.
Right.
And I was a little disgusted by that, point.
Right.
But apparently he went to John Mara, and since they were putting him on ice, they weren't even going to let him practice because of this injury guarantee. They would have had to owe him $23 million extra more next year if he were to get injured either at practice or in a game. So they didn't want to hamstring themselves, so they demoted him to fucking fourth string and were putting him out at scout safety, and it was just humiliating. So he gave a prepared speech, which was I'm on the verge of tears listening to this guy, talk about how much, Dexter Lawrence comes out, says he's still the best quarterback on our team. Daniel Jones asked about it. It's the first time I've ever seen him show emotion ever. He gets all choked up. And then he's gone. And, I really mean this from the bottom of my heart, that I wish the best for that person. I've never seen such a player with such humility and who's gone through so much shit. Being the quarterback of the New York Giants is a really difficult job. And I want him just to stick it to John Mara, to go and get signed by the Raiders, which he's rumored to, I think that's part of why he wanted to get released. He wants to play. If he goes there, or if he goes to Minnesota, or if he goes to another team that needs a quarterback or a backup right now, there's rumors he could back up Lamar Jackson in Baltimore. That would be great for him. I'm going to root for him no matter where he goes. But Malik Neighbors asked about this at the end of this game. Looks like it wasn't Daniel Jones, is basically what he said. So it sounds like, and I've been a Dable defender for quite a while, but he's lost the locker room.
Yeah.
He's lost the locker room.
And it does.
They're publicly questioning their decisions about Jones. They're talking about their effort, Malik Neighbors said, ask Daves why he didn't get the ball in the first half.
It does seem also convenient that after that reaction, like after Neighbors basically was like, why am I getting the ball down 30-0?
Yep.
And it's not as if DJ was making this look any different. Like, we didn't look better because we changed a quarterback. That I saw some notification from Bleacher Report. There was some reporting that, like, people were getting disgruntled in the locker room about Jones's play. I'm like, yeah, that's probably like team side press leaking that, or team side press people or comms people leaking that, because it seems pretty clear that everyone is kind of disgusted by how some of this stuff played out. But also, I think at some point you get to a point where things are that demoralizing. You kind of, I think it's hard for guys to play for something where it doesn't seem like there's any real positive outlook.
Listen to this quote from Jermaine Illuminor, who was at left tackle since, again, Andrew Thomas is out for the year. The line is shitty again. Illuminor, who grew up in London as a Giants fan, and it says it's his lifelong dream to be a part of this franchise. We have given him a 2-9 team to play on. Illuminor, I personally don't think everyone's giving 100%. I mean, you're 2-9. You have to be real with everyone. I'm 29 years old. I'm a vet in this league. And if anyone has a problem with me saying that, they can come see me. But this is in comparison to Daboll saying, no, I don't think there's an effort problem in the locker room. Yes, and, like, right. What else is he saying?
Up is down, basically.
but they've, like, I really never thought Daboll, he came into this season with, like, a good NFLPA record. Everyone has, when I follow this team, they've said that he's good at relating to the players, but something is not translating. And I don't know what happens after this year, but it's hard for me to imagine he's still the coach next year at this point, which sucks, because I think in a different circumstance, if he got his quarterback, he could have had success. But and at a certain point, it's just like, you need a fresh voice. And it's been 3 years. And, Kevin O'Connell probably should have won Coach of the Year that year that the Giants beat them in that wild card game. Those two guys came in at the same time, and I've always kind of defended Daboll and said, his set of circumstances, it's not necessarily like, no. Kevin O'Connell is proving he can make it work with anybody, and Daboll hasn't.
And I think the effort level, or even sometimes some of like the lapses in play, I do think sometimes that stuff does get worse. And I'm obviously saying this for the Jets. The defensive coordinator for the Jets takes over, and the defense looks worse than it did prior to that. Like, I think these things sometimes can happen, where these lapses and these slips proliferate when this much turmoil does continue to kind of like spread around the locker room and onto the field. Because, these guys are people, right? Like, it's also, it's hard to work it's hard to be and persist and exist in a work environment that is either at best kind of like disjointed and kind of like jumbled, or like sort of there's not really a unifying vision, or at worst it's toxic. Like, I don't know, this play has been going around on Twitter of Bobby Okereke, who, by the way, Bobby Okereke is a team captain. He played at basically an all-pro level last year. He was one of the best linebackers in the league last year.
I mean, he's a total Boy Scout.
And he took this angle he took on one of these rushes from Tampa Bay yesterday. It was like he had no angle on the play. He was spun around like 3 or 4 different times. It's like people. It's gotten to a point where like this is almost how
even that guy who is truly
a consummate pro, a good player, and it's how I feel. Like, obviously to a lesser extent, because like Sauce Gardner is like a second, third year player. But I'm saying, when you see regression like that from good players, from solid players, from guys who are like positive net positives in the locker room and on the field, I think it's because of I don't think it's just like, oh, all of a sudden they've forgotten how to play football. Circumstantially, things have changed significantly.
Yeah.
It's a huge bummer, because like
huge bummer.
We saw something from those guys, and 2 years ago, to where a team with a kind of talent depleted roster played far above their station, and just things have not. They've not been able to build on that, unfortunately. And if anything, unfortunately, with some of these personnel choices, as well as just what we've seen on the field, like some people some steps have been taken backwards.
the Raiders and the Giants will be in competition for Shadur Sanders and Cam Ward, and those are the only two quarterbacks worthy of any first round selection by my estimation. I'm not really crazy about either of them. Shadur is very technically strong, and like Cam Ward probably has higher upside, but that motion is weird. I don't really know. I mean, like, or they punt and they go for Arch Manning in the draft after, which I could totally see, John Mara salivating over that possibility. Another Manning. Perfect Boy Scout. We'll never have to draft a black quarterback at all. So anyway, yeah, this team is a joke, and I want them to lose out so they get the first overall pick, and ASAP. I did mention the Raiders, so let's just talk briefly about the Broncos game, and then we'll kind of go backwards. But Bo Nix continues his great play. Really making if the game, the Commanders game had gone that same way where it was so low scoring, it exploded in the second half. But it's like Bo Nix is catching up statistically to Jaden Daniels. It's a two-person race at this point, I think, for Offensive Rookie of the Year between those two guys. Bo Nix threw for 273 yards and 2 touchdowns, both to Courtland Sutton in that game against the Raiders. The Broncos just look like a playoff team. I had not realized that this was a 9-game road losing streak to the Raiders that was snapped by the Broncos. Maybe I wrote that down incorrectly, but the Broncos do have a really tough schedule coming up. Their next 3 matchups are the Bengals, the Chargers, and the Chiefs.
I was just saying they're like, unfortunate, incredibly talented and winning division rival coming up.
And the Chargers, however that shakes out between the two of them, that could be determinative about playoff seeding, because both of those teams are in the mix for a wild card spot and leading in that regard right now. Bo Nix looked great, efficient. I love his fastball. I love when he steps on it in these intermediate throws. It's a thing of beauty. But I just not getting enough love is Nick Bonito.
Yeah, he's like one of the best. He's like having like an all-pro season. Like he is like a bat out of hell all the time, going towards the quarterback. Or the
I remember him coming out of the draft in. Is it
2020 maybe or something like that, or maybe a year after?
I remember thinking he'd be a great second-round situational pass rusher, and he has evolved into way more than a situational pass rusher. He has become the first Broncos player to have 10 sacks in the season since Von Miller.
That's crazy.
In 2018, Von Miller had 14 and a half. That was the second highest total of his career. Of course, it was the MVP year. I think that he had the record-breaking total, but I don't know. There's not too much to say about this except that I think Bo Nix really still needs to be getting more love. Gardner Minshew broke his collarbone. He's out for the rest of the year. That's why I think Daniel Jones is probably likely to. That's the team that I think he'd be most likely to sign with. So any thoughts on that game?
The only outside of Benito, I just think that the Broncos defense continues to prove that it's one of, if not the best unit in the league. Patrick Surtain still looks just like the best cornerback in the league. He got like a pass deflection. I was like, I don't even know how you would have like keyed on that to know to go into that spot to deflect a pass. So this guy is absolutely insane. Yeah. And then also I also want to give some credit to, and I want to give some credit especially because this was a unit that, especially under Nathaniel Hackett, was not only underperforming, but was also particularly unhappy with their performance. Is the offensive line. I mean, Quinn Miners is playing really great football. Garrett Bowles, who I also want to give particular amount of credit for because he's probably one of the longest tenured Broncos. He's probably been there for about 7 or 8 years now.
Right.
Being a veteran on that team and still playing really, really high quality football at left tackle for them. He was a guy that I literally remember in 2021 or 2 when Hackett was coach, literally just him being like, I've been here for so long. I'm so sick of losing. I'm so sick of being so embarrassing. And so I'm just very happy for these guys that with a change, not just a change in coaching because it took a little bit, I think Rome isn't built in a day, obviously, even for a talented coach like Sean Payton, but to see kind of everything start to all move in the right direction. And also for a guy like Courtland Sutton, who's battled the injury bug for a lot of his career, he's still a great route runner, and he's still one of the, I would say one of the most the high variance catch radius type of guys. He always is a threat to take down a really highly contested ball. And so it's fun to see a lot of these guys who I think deserved a shot to play on a good and competitive team actually get that shot.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. So I'm rooting for the Broncos this year, and Raiders, join us in the trash heap over here at the New York Giants. So the Titans upset the Houston Texans, who now
It's crazy.
They were my Super Bowl pick to start the year. I'm feeling a little uneasy about that because they have issues on offense. Like they really do, specifically their line. They've now given up 17 sacks in 4 games. The Titans, I should say, focused really on just like taking Joe Mixon out of the game, and then things fell apart. I mean, they weren't and they still scored a bunch of points, right? I think CJ Stroud overcome some of these issues for them, but he's throwing a lot of picks. Nico Collins has given them some energy in the past game, but it still is a little too simple, it seems like, from Slowick, like that other teams have caught on. This was a fun game, though. Deep touchdowns abound to Nick Westbrook-Akine, to Nico Collins, to an inexplicable, like, horrible tackling play where Chaya Okonkwo took it like 70 yards as a tight end for the Titans, not a top tight end in the league. He's more considered a blocking guy all the way to the house. And it was just like a defensive breakdown for the Texans. But then what was crazy was that they were up 30-27. I think that's when the Titans went up. Then Kaimi Fairbairn gets in there to kick a chip shot field goal.
I couldn't believe this.
Closer than an extra point is now. And he's one of the best kickers in the league, and he misses it. And the Titans win against the Texans in a really thrilling game, but also a concerning game. And it had a little bit of everything. It had the Will Levis ridiculous play where he threw a pick six. I saw as he's throwing it, I see in real time, it's like it slowed down for me. There's 3 defenders around. I think it was 15, Westbrook-Akine, who's trying to target. Jimmy Ward just jumps in front of the route and takes it in for a pick six. And people were memeing like Will Levis just putting his head down, running towards like backwards to the end zone just to make fun of, here I am again. But they ended up winning, and good for Mr. Victoria Fuller. Yeah,
it's tough because he is just one of these guys who can throw like one of the most like beautiful high arcing like moon balls almost the length of the field,
right?
And then also just I'm like, this is the dumbest pass I've ever seen in my life. Like there's at least one of both every game he throws a pass where I'm like, that is one of the most gorgeous throws I've ever seen. I don't even know how a human being can do that. And then I'm like, this is the dumbest man on the planet.
Yeah.
Throwing into triple coverage where Jimmy Ward is like sniffing, is like standing on the route. Like he's just literally sitting there waiting to pick the ball up and run untouched into the end zone.
Right. And the thing is the Texans are going to win this division, right? It's just like, what is the ceiling of this team?
The issue
if the Chargers or the Broncos come in there, I mean,
no, totally. And the unfortunate thing is CJ Stroud is like basically fighting for this team's life.
Yeah.
Like he is playing under heavy amounts of duress the entire game. And it's a shame because Stroud's played despite really not having a huge amount of answers in the run game, despite Joe Mixon being back, and the offensive line just looking so much more disjointed than it did last year, is also sort of kind of masking Stroud's really excellent play despite all of that, as well as how good the front is on defense. I mean, Danielle Hunter had some amazing plays yesterday. Will Anderson is still one of the best, edge rushers in the league. Like this is a good defense, and Stroud is still, despite all of this, like playing like one of the best quarterbacks in the league. It's just tough that he has like we talk about this with so many teams where we're like, especially like, for example, with the Bengals, where like when things are on, they're on, but the margin for error is so slim.
Right.
I don't think there's any margin of error that's slimmer than like what CJ Stroud has to do, like to thread the needle to win a game offensively for the Texans right now.
Yeah, it really, and the line is the biggest disappointment here because I always thought pass protection was supposed to be their bag, and they're falling apart.
And especially in terms of health, because like. For the most part, for the majority of the season, Shaq Thompson was coming back, Titus Howard was coming back, Laramie Tunsil was there, Drew Scruggs was coming back. Like, Kenyon Green, was supposed to I think we were hoping to see a period of growth for Kenyon Green with more consistent play. And as we were talking about a few weeks ago, he literally got benched because of how ineffective he was on the field.
Yeah.
So like there's been a decent setback when it comes to protection for both both aspects in the running game and the pass game. And the thing I will ding Bobby Slowick for is that despite that, there's just, as you were saying, there's the creativity in the run game is just not there. And that's been a consistent problem even with the line playing better. There's just not a lot of ingenuity about like getting this running game going. Like it's a lot of just sort of like very textbook like give the ball to Joe Mixon, hope he can kind of like leap over the line. That's not giving any movement for him to get into the end zone or get a few, getting there's no easy yardage coming from the run game right now.
It's like they're basically kind of doing a more watered down version of Shanahan's zone running style.
Yes, right. But they don't have like the horses up front to actually make it happen.
Or really even the complexity off of that. Like what Shanahan does so well is he makes it look like a zone run play.
Exactly.
And it's like I don't necessarily think they've gone that extra step and
to make it seem like we can window dress this enough to misdirect team. Like there's no misdirection at all. It's just sort of like this is what we're running, and if you tackle the guy, okay. Well, I guess
they
we'll
can
move
get
on.
It together because I really do believe in the 1-2 punch of Stroud and Nico Collins.
Yes, 100%. And we saw there was some incredible connections between them yesterday.
Yeah. So I mean, they're gonna make the playoffs. It's just a question of how far can they go.
Exactly.
And I have my concerns about that as well.
I just loved one thing I did love to see with the Texans, despite Levis getting sacked a few times as well. The duo of J.C. Latham and Peter Skoronski on the Texans line, they are doing some good work.
Titans line.
On the Titans line. They are doing some great work in the run game. They're a really great double team
Latham
pair.
is the man. And also clearly, this is what hiring Brian Callahan and his dad to coach the offensive line means. Like, they're going to coach that offensive line to play well.
Because Skoronski has improved a lot since last season, and Latham is like a planet. If he gets his hands on this guy, it's like he's going to stop him in his tracks and just like throw him to the ground.
We forgot this in the running back conversation. Tony Pollard.
Oh yes, Pollard, who comes from the Cowboys and
much better year this year. And their run game. I mean, although they were inexplicably able to run the ball on the Commanders yesterday, but like overall, their run game is.
But definitely, Pollard has still been, even in the struggles the Titans have had, he's been pretty consistently down at a very good back for them.
And Ridley is playing pretty. The problem with Ridley is he can be a little in his head, it seems, and he's inconsistent.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But he's been playing well. It seems like since DeAndre Hopkins left, he's been like, okay, I'm the guy.
He has a little bit more
and he's
room to be like the number one guy.
Yeah, that's what it feels like to me at the very least. Speaking of DeAndre Hopkins, not too much to say except that, oh my God, they made it kind of close at the end. It's
probably the best Panthers game I've seen in like 2 seasons.
Yeah,
I think against the Raiders.
Best Bryce Young game I've seen as a pro.
100%.
I mean, he spread the ball around. Let me see if I can find the stat line here because I saw he just kept throwing it to different receivers, which I was really
and converting that 2-point conversion to Thielen. I was like, this was some high end quarterbacking from Bryce Young.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so like. It's David Moore, not DJ Moore.
Yes, every time I was seeing Moore, I was like, who is this guy? I was like, who am I watching?
He had 6 receptions for 81 yards and a touchdown, but Thielen got it 3 times. Xavier Legette got it 4 times. Mm-hmm. Sanders got it 3 times.
Which was Jatavian Sanders. But it was a similar thing. I was like, am I watching?
Not Miles.
Yeah, I was like, am I watching Miles Sanders? What's happening?
And then on the other side of things, like Mahomes had. He's starting to play better offensively.
This was, I think, also his like best game. I mean, obviously the Panthers defense is not as like formidable a unit as some others, but this game was surprisingly close, basically wire to wire. And then Mahomes, obviously, just because Mahomes is a magician, when he had to, they got more than enough on a really nice scramble from Mahomes, basically where he went untouched, finding a seam there down the left side, and then credit to Spencer Schrader, their backup kicker with Butker out to kick the winning field goal.
Oh no, he's injured. Oh. So sad. Yeah, no. Then they ended up winning by 3 points. I mean, the Panthers covered very easily for anybody that cares about that kind of thing.
Yeah, that would have been a fun one to have picked.
But I mean,
I'm going with the Panthers, actually.
Mahomes was shut down, though, in the second half by the Panthers. Like, he had over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns at halftime, and then his final stat line is 269 yards with 3 touchdowns. So, like...
They found a way a little bit in the second half to neutralize him.
But to your point, he had 60 yards rushing.
Right, and that was, I think, the big difference is just all they really needed to convert to get to Schrader to be in field goal range was Mahomes just finding that. But I'm super impressed with the Panthers. It's not as if Bryce Young in this offense did this against like a middling or mediocre defense. Like, this is one of the best defenses in the league. And
I think they are, but I've been seeing some people pointing out that like their secondary in particular with the loss of L'Jarius Sneed.
Yes, definitely probably not as high end in terms of it's either I think it's Shamari Connor or Shamari Connor, I think is his name. He got burned a few times in this game,
right? Because McDuffie's now CB1,
right?
And
so like everyone shifts down the line. Yeah, no, that makes sense totally. And I think, but I was impressed because honestly, one thing that was nice to see in this game is that the Panthers line is also actually pretty underrated. So Young actually being able to kind of convert some of the game awareness of like, I actually have the time, I can go through my reads and make some of these throws that he's clearly able to make. It just sort of felt as if for once in a long time, the game slowed down enough for him to really actually have an impact.
I was happy for him, and this is one place where Tepper's impulsiveness is paying off, where they overpaid for those guards. So
yes,
Bryce
exactly,
could be protected on the interior
to have some meat in the middle, so he can like.
I mean, he can't see over them, so he might as well not have to like be flush out of the pocket when he sees someone coming,
running for his life every down.
My gut, I'm rooting for Bryce Young, regardless of my opinions of him pre-draft. You know, I didn't think I would never have taken him over CJ Stroud, and he looks so small out there still to this day. But I mean, I want him to have success.
And credit. I mean, we'll see how this goes for the rest of the season. But credit to Dave Canales. I mean, this guy has really shown that he does really good work with quarterbacks.
Baker Mayfield last year,
and Geno in Seattle prior. And so it's just like I think he really has something when it comes to some of these quarterbacks who either A, are younger or B, need some rehabilitating. And he's shown that.
Yeah. Absolutely. The other kind of big game, I guess, in terms of an upset was the Cowboys beating the Commanders in...
I mean, this game was like...
This was another bonkers game.
This game, Scott Hansen on Red Zone, I actually think almost like fell out of his chair.
To be honest, I really think I should have seen it coming because, of course, Mike McCarthy knows Dan Quinn's defense.
Right.
Like, they're both men that I don't think very highly of as coaches. And
it's a little bit of loser on loser crime.
Right. And I guess I didn't know which loser to pick in this situation, but we have a double loser. We have a loser underneath that layer, which is the offensive coordinator on the Commanders, who we've come to the cliff.
We're approaching we are perilously close to the cliff right now.
We have come up against the cliff.
7-5, week 12. We're exactly where we're supposed to be. The car is hanging over the cliff.
We were right. Like, I fooled myself again into thinking Cliff Kingsbury could sustain this, but I forgot he doesn't make adjustments to his system after week 11 or whatever.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if he's in college, if he's in the NFL. It is like you could set your watch to this.
And what was amazing is also that Mike McCarthy just I think they made some halftime adjustments and Dan Quinn did none of it.
Nope.
And the Cowboys scored 24 points in the fourth quarter. So
from Cooper Rush, also, by the way, like not even
I know,
not even Dak. It was.
And they have no run game, and they have one wide receiver, and their starting tight end was out with a concussion. But I mean, Jalen Tolbert actually had a pretty damn good game.
Tolbert had a good game.
Aubrey's the best kicker in the league right now.
Yeah, which as we saw at the end of this game is actually a massive premium to have.
But this was another game, like the Texans-Titan game, another interdivisional bonkers game.
Yeah.
So, how was Terry McLaurin able to get open for that massive pass at the end?
Everybody was dropped back, and literally as Greg Olson and I forgot the other guy on the broadcast there. as they were saying, they literally just needed to tackle him in bounds, and the game was over.
Right.
All they had to do was like get a hand on him,
right.
and he went untouched into the end zone.
Yeah.
Like it was, and also Jaden Daniels must also have like touched a monkey's paw before the season or something like that. This is his. It didn't go the same way as the one before, but this is literally the second Hail Mary he threw this year.
Right. I mean, but there were also massive special teams issues too for the Commanders, because I forgot about this. Kevontae Turpin had
Turpin, the ball fell in front of him, and he ran, and then kind of almost, you thought too prematurely, did a spin move that seemingly stifled and foiled the entire special teams unit for Washington. They all seemingly got juked out by this, and he ran the length of the field for a special teams touchdown. That was an unbelievable play. Turpin is really fast.
But now it is like 3 in a row for these Commanders.
Yep.
They lost to the Steelers and they lost to the Eagles. And they had, was the Eagles game last week? I think so. It was. Yes. It was Thursday Night Football, so they had 10 days to prepare, and they still had all of these mistakes, like big mistakes on special teams, on offense. Micah Parsons was getting in.
That was the 14th. Actually, might have been 2 weeks ago. I think because the snow game was last week's Thursday night, the Browns Steelers game. Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. Well,
but yeah, that was the start of it though. That was the start of their three game streak of. They went from 7-2 to 7-3 to 7-5.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's true. But yes, it was last week because they had a long 10-day rest. So
when was Browns Steelers then?
Browns Steelers was this Thursday night.
Oh yeah.
So that was 4 days ago versus 10 days ago.
Yeah, my time is just compressing.
But okay, so their last loss was that game.
I see. Yes.
I had a thought. No, this is about the Vikings, but. They do have a little bit of an issue with the Commanders of letting teams back into games.
Yeah,
definitely. The Vikings, it's a little bit more pronounced, but
and the same thing. But there was this like with Fairbairn. It's like I don't know if Austin Siebert was like as like as good of a kicker this season, but like that was literally an extra point ties the game, and they bobble the snap.
Yes,
it's a low snap. They can't really get the ball oriented the right way. Siebert freaks out, misses the kick wide left. And the Cowboys get to walk away without having to even fight a tie. So kind of a brutal way to lose to your former team. But honestly, I'm still thinking we're at the cliff. But I still do I don't think it's affecting Jaden Daniels in terms of he still played pretty well.
He still played okay, but I just hated this hire for him.
That's what we're gonna get. Is if we see this long term, that's gonna be the problem, which is you don't want anything to stagnate with this type of player.
Right. I agree. I just wish that they were a little bit, I don't know. They clearly Ben Johnson turned them down and then they went to their second or their third choice or whatever it was. But, I also, to be fair to Dan Quinn and that crew, this is not a very talented team outside of some of the weapons on offense. On defense, they have issues specifically in their secondary, and they traded away Montez Sweat last season to get a pick, so they have some issues. They're building on this, but they're
overperforming already. It's just more. But the
trajectory with Kingsbury
is not good. Yes. Yes.
And let's just talk about the NFC North really quickly. So we had, as I mentioned, the divisional matchup yesterday between the Vikings and the Bears, and then the Lions also beat the Colts. But we'll start with the Vikings game. So the Vikings beat Chicago in overtime. They have now won 9 straight, the Vikings, which is amazing despite some poor play on occasion by Sam Darnold.
Right, even that rock fight game against the Jags, they still pulled out. It was 12-7, but they still won. A win's a win, right?
Right. They had a game-winning field goal from their kicker, whose last name is Romo. Apparently, no relation to Tony Romo.
Oh, I actually didn't know that.
Yeah,
I didn't realize there was another Romo. I love that.
Yes, but the Vikings do have a bit of this curse where. They were up on the Bears.
Yep.
They did this with the Packers. They've been letting teams back in. And then they shut the door. But it's you got to stop that before the playoffs because they're going to make the playoffs. It's just a question of, I just wish they had a little bit more discipline in the second half.
And you talk about Margin Ferrer, especially in a bit of a different way where it's I still think they're a really good defense, but it's like that's a 1-game sample.
Right.
Like if there is and you're only going to be playing against other good teams for the most part. Like you don't even want to have if you don't want to even have a team like the Lions or the Eagles potentially, for example, have their way back in, you know, and but I gotta give credit to Kevin O'Connell. This was a hard fought game. I feel like he really coached it well, and I do think obviously I think it's still a bit of a mixed bag with Darnold, but Darnold did have some really, really nice throws, a few great connections to Jordan Addison. Justin Jefferson obviously is sort of his safety blanket. He would be mine if I was a quarterback as well. I would just like look for his number and throw it and hope for the best.
Yeah.
But I also think
Jefferson only had 2 catches this game. It was the Jordan Addison go off,
and
162-yard and a touchdown game.
And there are a few plays from him where I was like, damn, his footwork, his route running, like he's going to be a good young receiver for a while. He's really not that old to begin with. The Bears, I gotta give credit. I do think Caleb Williams is looking a little bit more like himself despite the loss. That last throw to DJ Moore to kind of get them further down to kind of keep them in it, I thought was a phenomenal throw and catch from those guys. It just seems like Thomas Brown sort of was like, all right, I don't know why we're doing this, where like we're just not trying to get the 2 best guys open all the time. And also, I think in the film room he sort of was like, Caleb. It was unfortunate because the sack happened at the end, but he was like, Caleb, like buddy, like. You don't need to go to 7 reads before throwing the ball. Throw the fucking ball.
Yeah.
Like count to 2 and throw the ball.
Yeah.
Like you can do
Get
that.
Get it out of your hand more quickly. And he had an incredible throw across his body, as you're saying, where you go, okay, whoever is on the coaching staff next year will have this to work with.
Because that's like a 1-of-1. Like he's bailing out all the way right to just like across his body launch that. Like that's an insane throw.
I really wonder. I wonder if Ben Johnson wants to go in the division. My guess is that he's not going to want to go in the division. More
because like you'd have to play 2 teams. You'd have to play twice against a team that knows you
intimately,
right.
And that is like having to play the Lions twice. That's actually sunk some careers, I think, and I can't think of who off the top of my head, but I remember some sports trivia buried back there about that. But
we were even seeing it in some of these games today, where it was like McCarthy and Quinn and like stuff like that, where it's just like or the
Giants when they hired Jason Garrett.
Right. A guy somewhat intimately in that way because like you're scouting that guy in practice every day when he's on your team, and then you just have to scout him again. Like yeah. So I see what you're saying.
And the Lions beat up on the Colts. Anthony Richardson looks slightly improved, but he did miss Alec Pierce for this like wide open.
There were a few great throws he had that either his receivers dropped or Ashton Doolin stepped out of bounds. And I'm like, guys, like,
come on.
We can't even see.
This isn't helpful for our agenda.
Yeah, no one's gonna look at these plays. Like, catch the ball.
I know. There were a few though.
The Anthony Richardson propaganda machine needs to continue to run.
I know.
It's not going to keep going if you guys miss the ball or go out of bounds too
early. Don't you understand? We have an agenda here. Jahmyr Gibbs, my guy, had 2 rushing touchdowns. David Montgomery left the game for a bit, but it seems like he's fine.
Yeah, I hope so for my fantasy interests. But that was another one of those games where it's like, even if Jared Goff doesn't have an amazing game, that the 2-headed dragon came in and just kind of they kept pace almost the entire time. It wasn't really that competitive.
What's amazing too is just like Tim Patrick, I see him as the third receiving up. He comes and catches some timely balls. They have so many guys who can do things for them.
It's
Jameson Williams or Amon-Ra is so reliable. The 2 running backs, like
even the other non-Laporta tight end, like they have Brock Wright in there. He'll catch some. It's just funny that sometimes like you literally like at least with when it comes to Tim Patrick, it's like I forgot he was on the team.
Yeah, right. It's amazing. The Lions are the best team in the NFL. I don't have too much more to say about it except that. I really look forward to seeing them in the NFC Championship game.
I was trying to do this yesterday. I'm wondering if your top 2 in both conferences would be my. I think you probably would have the same as me. I was just curious what you thought.
Well, I think it's closer with the Eagles than it was at the start of the year with the Lions in the NFC because of just how the team has come on.
Definitely.
The Lions can match up with them with talent, even though I still think the Eagles are more talented. but with better coaching, like a lot
Yep,
better coaching
that's I think
on
part.
offense.
Yes, definitely.
So they're clearly the top two in the NFC. And then, God, in the AFC, I mean, the Chiefs and the Bills.
Yeah, that's what I said. That's what I ended up. Because honestly, I think it's just a blip for the most part. The Browns game for the Ravens, like it was bad.
Their defense isn't good enough. I mean, they can still probably they could probably win the Super Bowl.
Steelers. Sorry, the Ravens Steelers game. But yeah, I just think I still think with Josh, the Bills' offense is still like kind of humming a little bit more consistently recently, and I still think the defensive coaching is still at a really high level for the Bills. As you were saying, I think the Ravens' defense can get jumped on a little bit.
Yeah,
that's a little bit closer. I think in the AFC, I agree with you. I think it's like Lions, Eagles, and then a kind of significant drop. And for me, I think it's sort of like Chiefs, Bills, like 2A is the Ravens, basically. That's sort of where I'm at.
I mean, I don't know how I can put the Ravens ahead of the Steelers now, based on that game.
Right.
And
which is crazy to think, but fair enough, right?
As a full team, the Steelers are just playing better right now
because their defense is really.
Although they
really
did just lose to the Browns, but
that was a weird game because of the weather, in my opinion. Like I feel like that was like a bit.
I gotta think more about it. But
But I do think overall right now Chiefs, Bills in the AFC and Lions, Eagles in the NFC is like sort of like that's kind of where I'm thinking of like the four best teams.
Yeah, totally. And I think we'll I mean, obviously we're going to give our playoff predictions eventually, but I just think it's so clear like that who the playoff teams are and who aren't at this point.
Oh,
I mean, in the AFC,
100%, yeah.
Chiefs, Bills, Steelers, Ravens, Chargers, and Broncos, and that's 6 out of 7.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and Texans, like
that to me seems mostly.
Are those the teams that are going to make the playoffs? It seems like it.
That to me seems pretty cut and dry at this point because I think it might be a little too late for the Bengals, and I don't really see it for anybody else.
Yeah, I don't see it for
like not maybe like I think it's too late for the Dolphins also. I don't think they'll. I don't.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, they're coming back a little, but yeah,
I'm wondering if it's just a little too late at this point to make up that much ground, especially with how the Bills are playing.
Yeah,
but
in the NFC, I mean, it's the same kind of deal where it's the Lions, it's the Eagles, it's the NFC. Well,
guys, because I guess you would think
Falcons
maybe the Falcons.
Bucks.
Yeah, that's probably the toughest. I think is the toughest thing I think for the NFC is the West, just because
NFC West.
Basically all the teams are either like within one game of each other. I'd still probably bet on the Cardinals, but the Cardinals really got shut down by the Seahawks, so it's hard. That's hard to say. And same in the Niners. I'm wondering if the Niners are like.
Yeah,
I'm wondering if the Niners are cooked.
But the thing is like as we're talking about the NFC North, there are 3 playoff teams in the NFC
Yes,
North.
Correct.
I think that maybe gives you like a little bit more of me at least. Maybe I have more rose-colored glasses about the NFC than I should.
Yeah,
because the AFC South and the AFC West are NFC West and South are kind of shitty.
Yeah, the NFC South is definitely that's sort of just like that's a formality that someone has to go to the playoffs. From that division.
Right. So, but anyway, the AFC at least feels pretty set to me. Speaking of the NFC West, the 49ers lost to the Packers. The Seahawks defeated the Cardinals in that division, and so the Seahawks now are currently leading at 6-5. Which I don't think is going to last.
But the Mike McDonald defense, I think, has really kind of emerged.
I mean, look, like I think so. Well, it's just it's very different from week to week. It's because they're so young.
Yeah.
But
no, and also I feel like we saw a few things that we haven't seen so far. Like Leonard Williams had like a really, really good game, which he hasn't had like very, very consistently. Yeah. And Devin Witherspoon had like just this was one of those games where it's like this guy not only like just like plays with such a ferocity that it's like hard to match, but it also that intensity matched with just some unbelievable athletic feats from him. Like he had a wrong step on like a fake run on a run play for Kyler, and somehow recovered and sprinted all the way down to the corner basically with him. Then Kyler throws the pick that ultimately becomes the pick six, and Witherspoon, to his credit, after taunting Kyler after the pick,
He's
got
such
back
a psycho.
got back in and blocked James Conner so that the guy who got the pick could score in the end zone. So it was just one of those games where I think you really saw how intense and how hard these guys can play. But
Right.
obviously, as you said, for it to be, we shall see how sustainable it is. And this Cardinals offensive line is not like incredible to begin with also. So I think there are some
Yeah.
caveats to this as well.
I mean, that was probably the most boring game of the afternoon, I got to be honest with you. I will just say, I mean, both quarterbacks threw interceptions. Neither team could really capitalize on it that much on offense. That's one of those weird divisional games where I'm not going to glean too much from it.
Yeah, it's a bit of a
We'll
slot
see
fest.
how it goes. Yeah, that's that. Right, exactly. And okay, so final game actually here. The Packers 38, 49ers 10.
Yes.
Now, are the 49ers cooked?
Well, I guess I lean toward yes, just because if Brandon Allen has to continue starting, I think the answer is definitely yes.
Apparently, it seems like Brock Purdy is going to start next week.
But the problem I think we've been talking about this a lot the last few weeks. It just does seem like there is the explosiveness is still missing.
They're old.
Even with McCaffrey back in the fold, even with Debo out there, even with Kittle out there. Obviously, there is the absence of Ayuk, but he wasn't playing he wasn't kind of blowing anybody away prior to the injury.
And Nick Bosa wasn't playing. Trent Williams wasn't playing.
Right, and Trent Williams. Yeah, I just think the combination of the injuries and the lack of explosiveness to kind of supplement any of the attrition that they're having on the roster is making it really, really difficult. They look sort of unrecognizable from the season before.
Yeah.
It's just not the way I'm used to this offense looking.
Right.
And to credit to the Packers, I mean the Packers made, and it's not easy to do this on a Kyle Shanahan defense, but he made some of these linebackers and safeties look. Matt LaFleur in this run game made the spine of this Niners defense look kind of silly. I mean, I think it might have been one of the first run plays of the game for the Packers. They had Jaden Reed go motion to the right. They snapped the ball. Jordan Love does like a half spin, and the guy coming from the other end, which is Jacobs, gets the ball from Love, and every Niners linebacker has like no idea where to look, and Jacobs just goes straight up the gut for a big gain, and it's like. These are guys who are obviously very familiar with each other, but this is a different team where like the Niners linebackers aren't like sniffing out a fake. Like that to me is almost as concerning as the lack of explosiveness on offense.
They've had a bit of brain drain on that side of the ball.
Totally.
With the departure of Saleh to the departure
Ryans,
of D'Amico Ryans,
Steve Wilkes, and then
right.
Yeah.
Like they have had so much turnover on defense, and they are just older. They're too injured. They're not explosive anymore. And again, I still maintain the mental hurdles it takes to get yourself excited to go through a whole other season when it's now been 2 times that this team has gone to the Super Bowl and lost to the same guy, same team that came back and beat them.
It's a Herculean task in a way.
The first one, I remember watching it from the freaking Iowa caucuses in my hotel room in 2020, was coming back into the fourth quarter.
Yep.
Then last year it was an overtime.
Overtime, yep.
Heartbreaking. Like, what does that do to a team that keeps getting older and older?
And to when you think potentially when it comes to last year, maybe that was the perfect chance to do so, and it still didn't happen.
And Christian McCaffrey is back.
Yes, no, right. It's not. They're not only relying on Jordan Mason, and if anything, I think Jordan Mason had one of the few real
Bright
plus
spots.
run plays for them, and it came from the backup and not McCaffrey.
And to your point about how the Packers played, like LaFleur is my coach of the year.
He is an unbelievable coach.
Such a great game planner. I'm looking at the stat line. Jordan Love threw for 163 yards. Like,
right, it wasn't. They
nothing.
didn't need to rely on him.
Josh Jacobs was the guy that carried the day because
Right.
the 49ers at their own game. Ball possession.
Right.
Run the ball. Like
and death by 1,000 cuts, basically. Like just gain enough in 2 or 3 run plays to advance the ball, and you are just like kind of snuffing the other team out, basically, just by hanging on to it.
Yeah, Josh Jacobs had 3 touchdowns, over 100 yards on the ground, and then Emmanuel Wilson.
The other running back.
Yeah, also had 41 yards rushing. They brought in a little bit of a committee for that, or I guess it was a 2-headed monster to a degree.
But the fact that as we saw with the Malik Willis games too, that basically they are able to this offensive staff is basically able to scheme up plus plays for essentially like anyone who is out there for them, and that to me I think is just such epitomizes really good coaching, where certain guys the Titans could not get anything out of Malik Willis, but Matt LaFleur could, because he is very, very, very talented at zeroing in on what actually makes players good, even when other teams don't see it, and also putting them in the most optimal positions to succeed.
So you agree, of these non Lions NFC North teams, like the Packers are the second best, I think.
Yeah, so now, but I'm wondering, do I think the Packers are better than the Eagles?
I can't say that. I think coaching wise,
that's maybe. That would be
the playoff matchup I'd most want to see.
That would be interesting. Packers Eagles in a playoff environment, yeah. But that's maybe my third. In looking back now, my third would probably be the Packers in that caliber.
I mean, and then it's kind of a huge drop.
That's sort of what I'm thinking too. Is that it's kind of like a toss up.
But if I were to rank not seeding wise, maybe I'd put the Vikings 4th. I'd probably go Lions, Eagles, Packers, Vikings.
And then from there, it's a really steep drop off to me, because I feel like I'm like, I don't know what relative to like the Seahawks or like
or the Falcons, who've been falling apart.
That's exactly. It's not. I
mean, the Bucks just beat up on the worst team in the NFL, so it's like
hard to.
What can I glean from that?
Exactly.
But the Bucks are getting Mike Evans back.
Which will be very helpful.
That'll be very helpful. 100%. So anyway, it's interesting.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see if anything really moves the needle for us from what we're thinking there over the next 5 weeks.
The thing is that the AFC playoff teams, there's very little separation between all 7 that we just described.
Yes, agreed.
But for the NFC, there's really 3 or 4 teams.
It seems like kind of like a 4-man race. Then you have to fill out 3 other spots.
Right. Which, for all my talk about, oh wow, we're back to the NFC being more nope. The AFC is still a better division, top to bottom. So anyway. All right, well, let's just read some IMs and then we'll get out of here. Squirt Cobain says, I'm sorry, but how the hell can anyone put the Chiefs at the top of the AFC? They almost lost to the Panthers yesterday. How the hell can I? Because they've lost one game. They've lost one game, and because I saw this last year, also I can tell when they're fucking around and they don't care that much, which is basically almost the entire regular season at this point in their dynasty, and they're 10-1.
Yeah, no, I'm not worried about the Chiefs are like Dracula, basically.
Yeah,
like if I will worry about them when there's a stake in their heart.
Yes, yeah. I need visual evidence of them being dead.
Yeah, I need to see them being lowered into the ground and buried, and even then, I'm not certain that they're dead.
Right. Bobby Western, CJ Stroud, sophomore slump. Yes. Bobby Western also says, Emma and Bradley, join me as a Bolts fan. There's dozens of us, dozens. Well. The Rangers have lost 2 in a row. They're like 1-6 against playoff teams, and now there's rumors that they want to trade Kreider like right away, or Kreider or Truba, which I mean I'm fine with either. Although Kreider has been a great Ranger, it's just like there's something that needs to change. Oh, Niall from Trinidad said Mike Evans played yesterday to the Bucks. God, that truly, I must have missed that because I couldn't even look on the screen when for the most part during that game. What was his stat line? Gotta know now. I mean, God damn it. So such a frustrating watch, honestly. That team. All right, I'm looking it up. All right, Mike Evans. 68 yards. Jesus Christ, Emma. All right, well, he's back, and they're back in the mix. All right, guys, we're going to wrap up. there you have it. We will see you. Well, we'll figure it out because Thursday's Thanksgiving, but we got to give our picks.
Oh,
before
right,
that.
right.
You know you went 2-1 this weekend, right?
Yeah, and you know what happened to me on the other one.
That half point. I know. I told you about that half
Yeah,
point, right?
you're the Grim Reaper.
I really am. But I still have one. I'm 2-0, and I have one to go. So.
Oh, you have tonight, right?
I have tonight. Baltimore
Exciting.
-2.5. Prove me wrong, folks. I mean, right, folks.
Yeah, don't prove it wrong. Actually, no, do prove it wrong.
Yeah, prove me right. Baltimore. All right, guys. See you at some point before the holiday.
Yes. Bye-bye.